I never imagined a single sentence from a waitress could silence a room full of billionaires. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The air was thick with tension, the kind that wraps around your throat and squeezes tight. I stood there, trembling, wearing my faded blue apron, heart racing while I scanned the faces in the room. Flashes of gold and white flickered against the glittering chandeliers. The hum of whispers faded to a haunting silence, like someone had pressed pause on life itself. In that moment, their eyes were all on celebrities, tycoons, the elite of the elite, gathered around tables dripping in wealth. I felt small, insignificant, but something deep inside pushed me forward. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was courage. I don't know. Time seemed to stop as I took a shaky breath, feeling the warmth of the coffee pot in my hand. I thought of my mother, who worked 3 jobs just to keep us afloat, of my little brother who looked up to me like I was a superhero. My shift had only just begun, yet the weight of their stares felt like the world on my shoulders. I wanted to shout, to run, but I held my ground. And then it happened. With a voice shaky yet bold, I spoke. One simple sentence. Words I never thought could escape my lips. The room held its breath. One unexpected truth. Then, in an instant, you could hear a pin drop. A gasp echoed. I felt every heartbeat, every breath in the room. The billionaires, men and women who made decisions that could shake the foundations of the world, suddenly looked like lost children. I could almost see the gears turning behind their polished surfaces, the way their eyes widened in shock. I had somehow pierced through the veils of wealth and indifference. My stomach churned with uncertainty, almost regretting my words even as I witnessed the transformation wash over them. I had managed to grab their attention, to unravel the threads of their opulent lives, but what would become of me now? My heart raced as a looming dread filled the air. What had I unleashed? The seconds dragged on, heavy with uncertainty. Someone cleared their throat. A hand rose, but it was not the reply I expected. The silence throbbed like a living thing, wrapping around us tighter and tighter. What happened next? The reactions were swirling around me, stories halfway whispered, glances exchanged, a storm brewing. The room felt electric, alive with possibilities, and I stood in the eye of the storm, breathless and paralyzed. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The silence that followed my unexpected eruption felt unbearable, like walking a tightrope on the edge of a precipice. I could almost hear my own heartbeat thumping loudly against my ribs, a wild metronome marking the rapid tempo of dread and hope. The polished faces around me, usually so composed, were now agitated, their eyes flickering between stunned disbelief and uncontainable curiosity. I was an intruder into a world that thrived under the cloak of privilege, yet here I stood, stripped bare, completely exposed. Someone raised a glass, but not in a toast. It was a tremble, a betrayal of the chaos brewing within them. All at once, whispers crescendoed into fervent conversations, a whirlwind of opinions and evaluations about a waitress who dared to speak unfiltered truths. I felt like I was being tossed around in the rapid currents of their malevolent debates, fragile and insignificant. A statement like that, one man scoffed, his voice laced with condescension, from someone unable to grasp the breadth of real influence. Hot anger surged within me, but I fought it down, swallowing hard. Maybe he was right. What did I really know about the complexities of wealth and responsibility? But I was equally aware that my mother's hard work, her sacrifices, didn't exist in the periphery of their grand tales. They wouldn't understand, just as I had been struggling to comprehend their world. Yet, amidst their harsh judgments, a woman at the far end of the table stood up. Her elegant silk dress shimmered under the light as she waved her hand in the air, calling for attention. "Let's hear her out," she declared, her voice smooth yet assertive, cutting through their criticisms like a knife. Her eyes, deep and empathetic, locked onto mine. "Who among us hasn't felt the weight of our choices?" she continued, and instantly, I saw a flicker of connection between us. Her firm gaze broke through the sea of indifference. If we're not willing to listen to a voice simply because it comes from a lower tier, then what do we truly stand for? Relief washed over me as the tension in the room shifted ever so slightly. Hope glimmered as that singular voice of kindness slipped into the chaotic conversation, like light piercing through dark clouds. But just as quickly, a wave of dread clung to me. What if her kindness was simply a fleeting moment? What if they turned their disdain back toward me once more? I felt small again as I spoke up, my voice steady though my insides shook. "I didn't mean to offend anyone. I just wanted to share how it feels, living with a constant reminder of what we don't have." The woman nodded thoughtfully, her stance unwavering as she folded her arms. "You have every right to speak your truth," she assured me, casting a contemplative look at the room. "We all owe it to ourselves to listen, don't we?" The chorus of murmurs grew louder, bubbling with uncertainty. Some scoffed, while others whispered agreements under their breaths. My heart quickened. I wasn't alone anymore, I was part of a dialogue that straddled the line between worlds we had never known. But just as I felt emboldened, my voice wavering bravely in a crowd that was unfamiliar, I heard something from the corner of the room that sent a chill down my spine. "It's all well and good for her to speak her mind," a deep voice added, laced with contempt and something darker, almost predatory. "But those of us who wield power know the truth, the weak will always remain weak." A shiver prickled down my spine as I locked eyes with the man who spoke, a titan in the corporate world, a name I often heard across hushed whispers. His presence engulfed the atmosphere, dragging it back into colder waters, the warmth faint and flickering. A knife twisted in my gut. I had stirred the pot, but what of the consequences? What if my boldness drew unwanted scrutiny? As more voices filled the air, the atmosphere flipped once again, swirling into tension and uncertainty. The woman who had defended me stood resolute, unafraid, yet the shadows behind my eyes were anything but comforting. I could see a wall beginning to build between those willing to listen and those forever cloaked in arrogance. Just as I caught my breath, something sharp drew my gaze. A hand rose cautiously, waving, unfurling from the shadows of discontent that gathered alongside the elite. It was a familiar face, one I never expected to see here, yet couldn't shake from the back of my mind, a former classmate I had lost track of years ago. His blue eyes sparked with recognition, flickering with compassion, yet tinged with confusion. "Jessica?" he called out, his voice cutting across the continuing clamor. My heart dropped. I had thought I had buried those memories long ago, hidden away beneath a mountain of bills, responsibilities, and broken dreams. But suddenly, the past rushed back, unraveling in a rush. What was he doing there? And what would his presence mean for everything I had just begun to build? The air crackled with expectation, a shifting of alliances and the promise of revelations yet to come. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding against the lock of uncertainty that bound me. I realized I stood there, vulnerable and exposed, with the past colliding with the present. This wasn't just about the truth I had discovered. It was about the choices that awaited me at every turn. And sometimes, those choices could lead to the kind of clashing storms that could forever change your course. The room held its breath, a thick silence settling over the chaotic energy as every eye turned toward me, waiting for a response. I could feel the weight of my former classmates' gaze, like an anchor pulling me back to a time I desperately wanted to escape. My throat felt parched, words lodged somewhere deep inside, unable to surface. "Jessica," he said again, softer this time, like he was searching for a bridge over the years that had slipped away between us. I met his blue eyes, and a swell of memories surged like a tide. The carefree laughter, shared struggles, the comfort of camaraderie in a world that often felt too vast and overwhelming. It struck me as almost cruel that he would appear now, with everything unraveling around me. Do you remember that summer at the lake? His voice broke through the tension, stirring the past into a momentary reprieve from my present turmoil. I remembered the laughter, the freedom, and the promise of hope before life's realities set in. You always had a way of seeing things others didn't. A flicker of warmth ignited inside me, but it swiftly dimmed under the pressure of the glaring eyes around us. What did he want from me now? This wasn't just a touchstone from my past, it was a reminder of everything I had tried to bury, everything I had pushed aside to survive. I started, my voice trembling like the quivering string of a violin desperate for a melody. I didn't mean to cause a scene. I just felt compelled to speak. Compelled? He echoed, his expression shifting from surprise to something deeper, more insightful. You're making an impact, Jess. These people, he gestured around the room, they're here, listening to you. Maybe for once, they're actually considering what's at stake. Around us, the murmurs began to shift again. He made it sound so simple, yet here I was, standing in the crossfire of judgment and perception, ill-equipped to handle the reality of what I had initiated. And yet, somehow, this was my moment. But that moment was abruptly threatened as the corporate titan re-emerged from the crowd, the glint of derision still sharp in his voice. Is that the best you can do? He sneered toward me, feeding the insatiable hunger for power and assertion he clearly thrived on. A nostalgic recollection? It's quaint, really. But you must realize, emotional sentiment doesn't change the rules of the game. Pinned beneath his icy glare, everything about me felt small and insignificant. What was I doing here? I was just a waitress, trying to navigate a labyrinth of hearts and hidden agendas that I had only recently begun to understand. Jessica may not grasp your world as clearly as you do, my former classmate interjected, stepping closer to me, his protection felt like warm armor. But the experiences she's sharing resonate. They're valid. Don't dismiss them. A ripple of uncertainty coursed through the crowd, a mingling of intrigue and discomfort. For a fleeting moment, I felt united in an unlikely alliance, a flicker of hope blossoming against the tide of doubt. But hope has a way of becoming a double-edged sword. Let's not forget, the corporate titan replied, his eyes gleaming with malice, sentiment can only go so far. Ultimately, those who are weak will falter. The world doesn't pause for your tears, dear. His words struck a chord, the reverberation echoing through the silence like a distant thunderstorm poised to unleash its fury. A ripple of tension felt palpable. I wasn't expecting him to target my vulnerability so directly, to stroke the fear that coursed through me. What if he was right? Caught in the brewing storm, I struggled to maintain my footing. Around me, the crowd shifted, some looking intrigued, some uncomfortable, and others, those who questioned a fraction of my worth, quickly reverted to their privileged defenses. Maybe the world doesn't change for our grief, I forced myself to respond, sounding far braver than I felt. But it doesn't mean we're powerless. We can try to change how we see each other. The words escaped, tentative but determined, leaving behind a lingering silence. I felt raw, standing there, with the remnants of my insecurities woven into every syllable. Would that be enough to be heard? Suddenly, an unexpected sound broke through the heavy air, a soft applause trickling from the far end of the table. It began as a hesitant clap, soon joined by another, and then another. The warmth spread slowly, stabilizing the ship sailing through uncharted waters. The woman who had defended me. She was clapping, her face beaming with approval, rallying support like surges of sunlight breaking through ominous clouds. Others followed suit, one by one, their applause rising and falling. Ironically, this moment of camaraderie drenched in vulnerability almost shimmered with electric potential. It felt beautiful and bewildering all at once, as if I had inadvertently sewn together a fraying quilt of hearts, each patch representing its own struggle, its own courage. But just as quickly, my heart plummeted. What if this was merely fleeting, a spark that might spark new flames of indifference once the lights dimmed, once the evening dissolved back into the layers of privilege it thrived on? I was painfully aware of my precarious position, standing on a ledge with no safe ground beneath me. My past had come rushing back, and now this unexpected wave of support threatened to tumble into an abyss of disappointment. Amidst the applause, someone stepped away from the shadows, another familiar face. A friend from my childhood, one who knew too much about the turbulence I had faced before. She stepped forward, her brows knitted in concern, poised to pull me back into the very depths I had tried to escape. "What are you doing, Jessica?" she whispered urgently, her voice barely audible above the clamor. "This isn't where you belong." In that infinitesimal moment, the applause faded into background noise, and all I could do was stare at her, frozen in uncertainty. What was I even doing here? How had my one single sentence snowballed into a tempest of veneration and skepticism? And as my heart raced with conflicting emotions, I realized there were deeper questions rising alongside my fears, questions that promised to unravel everything I thought I understood about the world I lived in and the choices I would yet have to face. I could feel the storm approaching again, its undertow threatening to pull me under. Would I have the strength to ride its waves, or would I be swept away by the tides of my past? The applause lingered for just a heartbeat before retreating, leaving behind an echo of uncertainty that carved into the stillness. I felt exposed, as if every soul present held a magnifying glass to my insecurities. The warmth of support had ignited something within me, but the icy grip of doubt remained, clawing at the edges of my resolve. "What are you doing, Jessica?" The urgency in my friend's voice cut through the room, drawing unwanted attention my way. Her eyes, wide with concern, bore into mine, threatening to unravel the fragile thread of bravery I had just spun. "You can't be serious about this." "Maybe I am," I whispered back, brushing her off with a shaky inhale. "Maybe they need to hear this. Maybe I need to say it, don't you get it? This isn't your battle. These people, what do they even care? You're just another face to them." Her tone dipped into desperation, pleading for me to retract my sentiments. Yet in her worry, I found an unexpected push, a challenge to face the tempest brewing inside. "What if I'm tired of being just a face?" I shot back, my voice rising. The word surprised us both, filled with a fierce longing to move beyond the shadows cast by others' perceptions. "What if I want to have a voice? This isn't just me anymore. It's about all of us who don't feel powerful enough to speak up." She opened her mouth to respond, but the corporate titan's voice sliced through the air before she could find her words. "Beautiful sentiment, really, but who has time for dreams when facing reality?" His disdain dripped from his words, spitting out like venom. A chill coursed through me, but there was something deeper at play, a spark of rebellion flickering inside. "Maybe that's the problem," I said, surprising even myself. "Maybe too many of us have abandoned our dreams to fit neatly into the boxes that others have crafted for us. What's wrong with reaching for something more?" I felt the room hold its breath again. The tension coiled tighter around us, mingling with the palpable thrill of vulnerability and anger. Memories surged, and I recalled the times I had silenced my own voice, burying it beneath layers of duty, expectation, and fear. I had spent so long trying to blend into the background, cautious of stepping outside my defined roles, but there was something freeing about this moment, like flinging open the shutters to a sunlit room after years of darkness. "Spare us the lecture, darling," he replied coolly, but some in the audience seemed caught in thought, contemplating the scars I had laid bare. That I struggled to meet their gazes, feeling starkly aware of how exposed I was, my words a flimsy fabric woven from pain and possibility. Yet, amidst the stares, I spotted her, the woman who had started the applause, her face now intense and unwavering. She leaned forward, her eyes wide with admiration and something else, determination. Empathy. "We've been too silent for too long," she spoke, voice firm. "This is the conversation we need to have. And Jessica, you are doing it. Don't let anyone silence you." My heart swelled at her solidarity, a warmth spreading through me like light after a storm. Yet, uncertainty gnawed at the edges of this hope. What if my words turned to ashes when faced with reality? Would her courage remain when confronted by those more powerful than us? In that moment of uncertainty, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned instinctively, and my stomach dropped as I recognized another figure from my past. Anthony, a former colleague, whose sharp remarks and biting critiques had haunted me since the day I left my last job. He stepped into the light, casting shadows over my newly kindled courage. "Jessica," he began, his tone condescendingly sweet, "impressive show. But let's not pretend this is anything more than a naive display of emotion amid a sea of capitalist giants who didn't get where they are by indulging cries for empathy." His words, like icy shards, cut through the warmth I had just begun to cultivate. The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing his intrusion, but it drew forth a sudden resolve within me. Maybe that's exactly the point. "Anthony. You've limited your worldviews to money and power, but I see something different. Something we need to change. Changes are made at board meetings, sweetheart, not through impassioned speeches," he shot back, but a ripple had begun, and the crowd seemed to falter between him and the warmth growing in my defense. "Maybe some of us are tired of waiting for the right time to change things," I said, the weight of his scrutiny sparking an unexpected fire. "We are all human, not merely transactions in your financial scenarios. You talk about power, but what about the power of kindness, the strength of empathy?" With every word I spoke, the realization struck: I was no longer just a waitress standing in front of an audience of billionaires, I was a voice tangled in a larger narrative of humanity. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was enough to shift the framework I had been trapped within. The applause started again, punctuated by scattered murmurs of agreement, but there was also a flicker of anxiety weaving through the crowd. I held my breath, the uncertainty of whether this moment would lead to something more or burn out under the glint of the Titan's disdain. As I reset my gaze on Anthony, a thought crossed my mind in a sharp flash: what if he had something more to reveal? Something that could shatter this burgeoning hope. Just as I opened my mouth to respond, he moved closer, lowering his voice as he smirked. "You truly believe this is the beginning of a change? What if I told you there's more at stake than you realize? You may want to rethink this little performance, because the repercussions might be deeper than you're prepared for." My heart sank as I held his gaze, dread pooling in my stomach. The resonance of his warning echoed ominously in my thoughts. What could he possibly mean? And as the room shifted around me, caught in the tumult of emotions, I realized that while the applause rang true, I had unknowingly stepped into a web spun from choices I had yet to comprehend, choices that could either ignite lasting change or plunge me deeper into a reality I was desperate to escape. The silence that followed Anthony's words hung heavily in the air, pulsing as if the room itself held its breath, caught between two very different realities. My heart raced, a cacophony of thoughts spiraling through my mind. What could he know that I didn't? The warmth that had begun to bloom in the wake of my speech began to wither, replaced by the icy tendrils of doubt creeping in. "Repercussions?" I managed, trying to sound steadier than I felt. "What are you talking about, Anthony? What could possibly happen?" I wanted to sound defiant, but the tremor in my voice betrayed me. I risked a glance toward my friend, who stood frozen, wide-eyed with confusion, as if she too felt the shift in the air. He leaned in closer, his breath a chill against my skin. "You've opened a door, Jessica. And doors, they can lead to very dark places. You should be careful about what you step into." The pointed malice in his gaze left no room for interpretation, and for a brief moment, I wished more than anything to retreat into the shadows from whence I had emerged, to sweep away the words I had so bravely spoken. But something inside me, that flicker of rebellion ignited by my earlier defiance, burned brighter in the face of his threat. "I'm not afraid of the truth," I replied, holding his stare, daring him to unmask whatever hidden truths he thought I was too naive to grasp. Perhaps I was afraid to stand my ground, but fear had lost its power over me. "I'm done being afraid." The crowd began to fill the silence where my courage had lingered. With every murmur of agreement that rippled through the audience, I could sense the tide turning. Then I caught sight of the woman from before, the one who had applauded with such fierce recognition, her presence bolstering my strength like the first rays of morning chasing away darkness. But before I could respond further, a flicker of movement at the corner of my eye caught my attention. In that moment, my world narrowed, the joy and fear warred within me, battling for dominance, as I saw the figure of a girl rising from the back of the crowd. It was Emma, the waitress who had been my closest friend since the beginning of my journey in this industry. Her frail silhouette carried the weight of uncertainty but also a flicker of intent. She approached slowly, the room quieting as her eyes met mine. "Jessica," she began, a tremor in her voice, "I need to tell you something." The veins of apprehension weaving through her words rippled across my skin. "Emma, now. Can't it wait?" My heart raced, sensing the shift. I wanted nothing more than to pull her aside and ask if she had witnessed the same devilry I felt emanating from Anthony. "No," she interjected, urgency lacing her words, sparking urgency in my own chest. "It's crucial. You must know this." Her brow knitted together, and I could see the emotion threatening to spill over. "Two overheard something last week. They're planning a reduction. A significant cut to staff. They might target people who have created waves, people who have begun to stir change." Dread pooled in the pit of my stomach, pooling with Anthony's ominous warning, creating a landscape of encroaching shadows. "Emma, are you sure? What do you mean?" Her voice was a blend of courage and terror. "I heard them discussing you. You've set off alarms," they said. "You're a risk, a wild card. They want to silence you before you can gather support. You're being watched." The sound of her words seemed to sap the air from the room, the irony twisted even deeper by the fact that the entity pushing for this change, this momentum, was now a target. My fragile flame of hope flickered ominously as I processed her words. Before I could fully absorb the implications, I glimpsed Anthony's smirk widening, his eyes glinting with knowing malice. He leaned back, savoring my disarray, rising above the storm he had himself summoned. "You see," he taunted, his voice dripping with condescension. "None of this is truly yours to own, Jessica. You've become a chess piece, unwittingly moved by hands beyond your control. And believe me, they don't play for keeps." Anger ignited within me, demanding release. "I won't let fear dictate my voice. If they want to silence me, they'll make sure the noise grows louder," I declared, though my heart quaked beneath the weight of his words. The crowd felt electric, a mix of disbelief and burgeoning reverence, the pressure mounting as they sensed the unfolding drama before them, yet in that moment, clarity dawned upon me. The very real fears of losing my job, my stability, what little safety I had built, it seemed fewer than the fear of remaining silent, of letting my anguish rot within me while others suffered bound in similar shackles. As the room fell silent again, a brave woman on a precarious ledge, I crafted my next words with a mix of resolve and trepidation, sensing the walls caving in but knowing I had just uncovered something vital. To every person who has ever felt unseen, unheard, this isn't just my journey. This is ours, and we will not go quietly. Just then, a door swung open, a figure standing at the edge of the crowd, a woman cloaked in authority. Her stance exuded a kind of strength I would later realize was the last thread of my hope. "Jessica. We need to talk. Now." As she stepped forward, my breath caught in my throat. A part of me braced for the consequences of your words, wondering who might be waiting on the other side of this demanding reality. In that instant, uncertainty gripped me tighter than it ever had before. Would this woman be the ally I desperately sought, or yet another player in this mimicry of control? As she drew closer, the room felt charged, breaths held in collective anticipation of what might happen next. And my heart pounded at the precipice of change, wondering if I was truly prepared for the torrent that lay before me, or if my voice would ultimately unravel everything I'd only just begun to grasp. My world narrowed as I stood frozen, the reality of that commanding figure moving through the crowd imploding my thoughts into a chaotic mess. Who was she? What power enabled her presence to alter the very air around us? As she approached, her sharp gaze locked onto mine, I felt a sense of urgency fermenting within me, pushing me down a path of questions I was terrified to explore. "Jessica, I'm Marissa, the new director of human resources," she said, her voice cool and collected but marred with an undercurrent of urgency. "Director?" I barely managed to voice, feeling my heart thud ominously against my ribcage. "What do you want?" She tilted her head ever so slightly, a gesture both affirming and scrutinizing. I could sense lingering tension in the air, as if everyone in the room was tuning in to our exchange, eager to decipher its significance. I could hear whispered conversations but chose to focus on Marissa. "I need to discuss the implications of what you've just done," she said, without missing a beat. You've taken a stand that could have serious consequences for you and for others. We need to make sure that actions align with intentions. My pulse quickened. You mean I'd be targeted like Emma said? That I might lose my job? Or worse? Marissa's silence spoke volumes, her brow furrowing slightly. It's not just about you. Everything you've said has ignited a spark, but with that spark comes a certain threshold of risk. You're calling attention to movements that have long been suppressed. I've seen this before. People can be handled. An unsettling chill swept through me at the weight of her words. I had acted out of passion, driving fully into the chaos that had once been my place of employment. I never considered the collateral damage. And then there was Anthony, lurking in the background, his expression one of amusement, a small smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. I shot him a withering glare, the confidence I had started to build quaking under the intensity of the moment. What do you suggest then, if I'm such a risk? I challenged, each word laced with defiance. Marissa paused, gauging my reaction. You need support, people behind you who believe in what you're doing, not just the threat of silence but a movement in its own right. I could help with that. But you need to tread carefully, Jessica. Each step needs to be strategic. My heart raced at the prospect of an ally. You believe in what I said? I asked, my voice softer now, almost vulnerable. I do. But belief without action is emptiness. Her gaze softened slightly, revealing a glimmer of empathy that illuminated the rigid lines of her authority. The board won't take this lightly. They know that change is brewing whether they like it or not, but they tend to crush it before it has a chance to bloom. A flicker of determination surged within me, battling the fears Marissa had so candidly painted. Then let's bloom, I declared, feeling emboldened. I'm not ready to back down. Her eyes were piercing. Consider this your first chance to build alliances, to navigate channels you've never walked before. Seek the support of those who are sympathetic, where the whispers are waiting to turn into a chorus. Before I could respond, the crowd shifted, and suddenly, amongst them, a ripple of murmured disbelief caught my attention. I turned to see Emma, who clutched a vintage letter with shaking hands, the corners of her eyes glistening with tears. The blood drained from my face. What is it? I whispered, fear gripping me again like a vice. They're closing in. Her voice trembled as she unfolded the paper, revealing the insignia of the company that sent a shiver down my spine. They've called a meeting. A meeting to discuss layoffs. The sharp intake of breath from Marissa hinted at the gravity of the situation. It was not just a threat, it was a rectifying knife aimed at the heart of a movement that was struggling to take its first breath. Everyone, Marissa addressed the crowd, her voice commanding. It's time to prepare for a storm. Jessica has ignited a cause, but we must no longer act as lone warriors. Collectively, we can navigate this. Let's gather intelligence. But before she could finish, loud footsteps interrupted the tension, echoing rage through the space as my boss, a man I once admired, stormed into view. His eyes were wild, a tempest of frustration. Who do you think you are, standing there, stirring discontent? He bellowed, stepping forward with uncontrolled fury. This is unacceptable. The crowd recoiled, but something wild inside of me ignited, and I stepped forward, meeting his blazing gaze. You can't keep us silenced anymore. Before I could fortify my words with weight, he rounded on me, his voice laced with venom. You're out of your depth, girl. You have no idea who you're dealing with. My heart pounded louder, terror creeping in with his underlying threat. In that moment, the reality of what I was risking closed in on me. But even amidst the clamoring disturbance of my racing thoughts came a fierce warmth from the crowd, even my own friends who stood alongside me. And just as quickly, it became clear that everything was about to unravel. Because as my boss continued his tirade, the doors burst open. Again a distinct figure limped in, a dark figure draped in shadows, and with them, the weight of impending doom. Jessica, they rasped, voice barely breaking through the chaos before us. You need to know the truth about Anthony. It was a voice I recognized, but one that seemed shadowed in dread. Suddenly, the fragility of my continuous struggle felt more profound than ever, like the final act on a stage prepared to ignite into flames. And in that moment, standing on the precipice of revelation, I was uncertain whether to brace for impact or to leap into the abyss. Because the truth, whatever it was, felt like it would unravel everything I had come to understand over this tumultuous journey. The commotion in the room swallowed the figure's words, but the chill they carried reached me clear as a bell. The crowd darted nervous glances between my boss and the new arrival, and questions swirled like autumn leaves caught in a tempest. I felt the press of uncertainty as I struggled to comprehend what this revelation would entail. Who was this person, and how did they know about Anthony, of all people? Jessica, please, the figure pleaded again, their voice rasping with urgency. It's important. I can help you understand what you're up against. What do you know? I demanded, every syllable steeped in defiance, as if confronting the shadows would illuminate the truths lurking within them. I didn't have the luxury of fear now, the stakes were too high. I've seen the mounting chaos, they replied, taking a cautious step forward, leaving a wavering silhouette between them and the furious burst of my boss' anger. The greed, the manipulations. Anthony isn't who you think he is. He's been playing a longer game. A shiver ran through me, mingled with dread and curiosity. What do you mean? What does he want? Power, they said flatly. He's been orchestrating more than you can imagine, all under the guise of loyalty. You've become a threat to him, one he cannot afford to let continue. The eyes of my boss glinted like shards of glass, the fury radiating from him almost palpable. I could feel the tension coil tighter in the air. Everyone seemed to hold their collective breath, waiting for the inevitable clash, the reaction, the chaos that would ensue as the ground beneath us shifted. Enough of this farce. My boss roared, cutting through the fragile truce that had momentarily filled the room. You don't know what you're dealing with, hiding behind riddles and threats. You'll not have insubordination in my company. He turned to me, fury brewing beneath the surface. You're treading a dangerous line, Jessica. This has to end now. No. Emma interjected, her voice ringing out with a bravery that surprised even me. We're tired of being silenced. Marissa stepped forward, her presence commanding once more. We need to gather, discuss. But my boss interrupted, a snarl twisting his lips. You're all playing games. Let me remind you where your allegiances lie, and who's really in charge. Think long and hard about how foolish it is to question me. At that moment, I could see the tension coiling, binding us all as if we were drawn into a shared fate beyond our control. And then, before I could react, Anthony appeared at the back of the room, the smirk plastered across his face morphing into something darker as he leaned against the wall, arms crossed lazily. Dare I say it seems you've all become rather animated, he chimed, feigning nonchalance but failing to mask the glint of satisfaction that lit his eyes. What's the matter, Jess? Not quite the army you envisioned? My heart raced as fear and anger coursed through me. The warmth that had ignited moments prior began to cool at the realization of the web being spun around us, an intricate play of power and vulnerability that I was desperate not to fall prey to. We're not afraid of you, I challenged, my voice small yet resolute. The truth is unraveling your lies, Anthony. His laughter rang hollow against the tumult, striking a nerve. Ah, but truth can be such a tricky little devil, can't it? Are you prepared for all its nuances, my dear? The figure who had warned me stepped closer, their presence overshadowing the disquiet surrounding us. You don't know the half of it, Jessica. If they lay you off enough. My boss barked, signaling with a ferocity that silenced the gathering storm. That I couldn't process the chaos spiraling around me. The stakes were increasing with every passing moment. The door swung open again, drawing the crowd's attention as another person entered, their face obscured by shadows, but there was an unmistakable sense of authority in their stance. The air grew thick with a tension that felt almost electric. You've all been called here to discuss something much more serious than you realize, they said, their voice piercing through the murmurs, sending an imposing chill through me. What you need to understand is that this company is a facade, and the fight isn't just for the jobs you hold, but for the very foundation upon which this company stands. What are you talking about? I pressed, feeling the somber reality settling around me like a cloak. revelations will come to light that will shake every one of you to your core. And the decisions made in this room today may very well dictate the outcome of opportunities you can't even fathom yet. With every word, my heart sank deeper into the pit of unease, a realization dawning that my small fight could unravel something much grander. And with one final glance at Anthony, a promise reflected in my minute treachery waiting to be unearthed, but at what cost? As I stood there amidst the whispers of betrayal and the weight of the unknown, I understood that whatever truth awaited, it had the potential to either sever the bonds that tethered us together or kindle a flame of rebellion that could light the way. But just as clarity began to settle, a shattered scream echoed through the room, a call that sent shudders through my spine and silenced every voice. My pulse quickened as I half-turned to see someone pointing with shaking fingers, and the reality of the moment crashed upon us like a tidal wave. The board members had arrived, and with them, the tension exploded, plunging us into darkness as they moved through the crowd like wolves, ready to hunt. The floor beneath me felt less stable than ever, and just as I grasped for something, anything, to cling to, a spiraling thought clawed at my mind, a single question echoing louder than the storm building around us: what happens when the very people orchestrating this dance are the ones pulling the strings? The silence hung heavy in the air, a palpable weight that threatened to crush the will of everyone present. I felt the room constricting around me, bodies stiffening with fear and uncertainty as the board members glided deeper into the heart of the chaos. They were not just any board members, they were the titans of industry whose decisions could topple empires in a heartbeat. That I caught Emma's eye, her expression mirrored my own horror, confusion, and a frantic determination flickering beneath the surface. But as I scanned the faces around me, I discerned fear overtaking resolve. We were outnumbered, dwarfed by the financial gravity these individuals carried. What is going on here? One of the board members, a sharp-featured woman with icy blue eyes, commanded. Her voice cut through the chaos with a razor's edge, eliciting a collective shudder from everyone behind her. Jessica, why are you instigating insubordination? My boss voice rang out, laced with desperation. This isn't the time or place, and certainly not the audience. That I seized the brief moment the room had collectively inhaled, stealing my voice to break through the stifled air. We were discussing Anthony, the manipulations he's been orchestrating. We deserve to know the truth about what's happening behind closed doors, Jessica. My boss warned, a flicker of panic in his eyes, but it was too late. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable but filled with a simmering tension. I could feel the energy shifting like an impending storm, and my gut twisted with the weight of uncertainty. If they recognized the cracks forming in our foundation, there was no telling how they would react. Anthony? The woman asked, tilting her head slightly. Are you implying you have information about Mr. Sanderson that may affect his position here? Not just Mr. Sanderson, the figure who first intervened spoke up, stepping closer to the forefront. This entire company is at risk because of the games being played here. You dare to question the integrity of our dealings? Another board member shot back, an older man whose presence demanded respect. Integrity? I echoed, my voice rising, empowered by the sudden swell of camaraderie building behind me. We've been misled. We're on the brink of losing everything: jobs, stability, trust, relationships. It's all on the line and no one here seems to care. The sharp-featured woman snapped, her eyes narrowing. Pledging loyalty to a company comes with its consequences, Jessica. You walk an uncertain path, and you've already begun to tread on dangerous ground. As her words seeped into the air, dread seeped into my bones. The truth was laid bare, and the realization we were all mere pawns in a game far larger than myself was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet, glimpses of hope flickered in the faces of my colleagues. Emma stood resolute beside me, a testament that perhaps solidarity could be our lifeline amidst the fray. Yes, Emma exclaimed, standing up a little straighter. If there's corruption, then we deserve to know. We deserve to fight back, but the onslaught of intimidation came in waves. You will regret this, the older man said, his voice a quiet, guttural promise that sent chills coursing through me. It was a warning, a threat wrapped in the guise of corporate civility. Perhaps it is better for you to remain ignorant, but I had glimpsed the crack in their armor, the hesitation lingering in the air, and I clung to that moment. You can intimidate us all you want, but we're not playing your games anymore. We are not afraid, and even if you take everything away, we will fight to uncover the truth. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, igniting something powerful between us. It was no longer just about the individual struggles, or the threats looming above us. I felt the pulsing heartbeat of unity awakening, echoing through the room like a war drum, and then the air crackled again, but this time not from the energy of our defiance. It was the sound of a phone ringing loudly, piercing through the gathered tension. The sound reverberated off the walls, startling everyone into silence once more. The sharp-featured woman reached for her pocket and pulled out her phone, glancing at the screen. Her expression soured, and suddenly the air became dense with urgency. "Enough of this nonsense," she snapped, angling her body toward the door. "We'll be in touch, but I suggest you start preparing for the consequences of your actions." The board members began to disperse, but as I stood there emotionless, time felt suspended, as if everything surrounding me slowed to a crawl. Amidst the dissolving tension, the figure who had initiated this upheaval brought me back to the present. "You've done well, Jessica," they murmured, brushing their fingers along my arm, a small gesture of solidarity that ignited a spark of hope within me. "But this is just the beginning. The fight isn't over yet, remember that." With those words hanging in the air, I felt a sudden rush of uncertainty. Had we truly stood our ground? Would this defiance take us further into the storm? Just as I began to contemplate the path ahead, a loud crash echoed from the back of the room, pulling my focus in a sudden whirl. That I turned, my heart racing again, to find the door had swung open, revealing a startled intern with wide eyes, standing frozen, a stack of files spilling across the floor, the contents fluttering like fallen leaves. But amongst them, one file stood out, a name on a resignation letter I could not forget. That as profound shock washed over the crowd, I stepped closer, a whisper of dread curling around my heart. The intern glanced around, fear written all over their face, and as my breath hitched in my throat, the connection solidified in my mind. The implications of that single name loomed larger than ever. What had I truly unleashed by seeking the truth? And could I trust anyone now as the brittle threads of loyalty fell away around us? The din of whispered conversations faded as I bent down to retrieve the fallen papers. My fingers brushed against the corner of the resignation letter, and the world around me seemed to blur into the background. The name at the top of the page sent a shockwave through my veins, igniting a mixture of fear and resolve: Henry Tams. The company's chief financial officer, loved and respected by nearly everyone, a man whose laughter often filled the hallways and whose wisdom guided the company through turbulent waters. He had always stood as a bastion of integrity in our corner of the storm. Or so I had thought. I could hardly breathe as I held the letter, its implications circling my mind like vultures. Why would he resign now? Did he know about the corruption? Or was he part of it? The intern, still wide-eyed and trembling, stammered, "I am sorry. I didn't mean to stop," I interrupted gently but firmly. "You did nothing wrong. But, can you tell me where you found this?" The intern hesitated, casting a cautious glance at the board members, many of whom were now glaring at my gathering group, a tightening noose of intimidation. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere, like a predator gearing up to strike. They left it on the table. It was just there," they said, their voice barely above a whisper. The realization sank in. Someone had wanted this letter to reach us, or at least had been careless enough for it to fall into our hands. I exchanged a knowing look with Emma, who stood just behind me, her brow furrowed in concern. Did she see what I saw? The puzzle pieces coming together, forming a picture of greater deception. "Jessica, you need to," Emma began, but I cut her off, the urgency coursing through me. I needed clarity. "No. We need to know what happened here. We need to find Henry. I think he was called into a meeting," the intern said, pointing towards the back hallway, the same direction the board members had fled. "But I can't." "You can," I insisted, my voice steady now, fueled by determination. "You can call him back. You're not just an intern. You have every right to be in this fight too." In that moment, something shifted again within me. The lurking fear began to morph into an ember of empowerment. While the fear of retaliation gnawed at my mind, I couldn't allow it to silence me anymore. As the intern nodded and scurried off, I turned my attention back to Emma. We have to find out what Henry knows. He has to be a part of this, but she hesitated, glancing behind us at the corporate giants still lingering, whispering amongst themselves. What if he's not on our side? We can't assume that, I replied. Not without hearing him out. Not after everything we've just stood up to. Just then, a noise caught my attention, footsteps echoing down the hallway. My heart raced as I turned to see Henry approaching, his features pale and drawn, as if he had just walked through a storm. The resignation letter was clutched tightly in my hands. Jessica, Emma, his voice trembled as he neared, casting furtive glances over his shoulder, dread etched on his face. What are you doing here? You shouldn't be involved in this, Henry, I said, the name barely escaping my lips as I stepped forward. We found your resignation letter. We're fighting back against Anthony and the others. We need to know what's going on. Are you with us? His eyes widened in terror, but beneath it, I glimpsed vulnerability. You need to stop this, he urged, backing away slightly. It's not what you think. You have no idea what kind of danger you're stirring, that we can figure this out together. My insistence echoed in the expansive room, but Henry shook his head vigorously. No, you don't understand. There's something far bigger at stake here. Then tell us. Emma urged, her voice sharp with urgency. We can't fight a shadow. We need the truth. His gaze darted back to the boardroom, where the figures of power loomed like unseen puppeteers. The tension was thick enough to slice, and I felt the world spinning around me as fear clawed at the edges of my consciousness. I can't. You don't know who you're confronting. He whispered, glancing over his shoulder again, as though sensing an unseen threat looming. You have to trust me. That moment, a shout erupted from the boardroom, thick with fury and age-old entitlement. Henry, where are you? This is no time to wander, his expression sharpened. You need to leave. Now. Not without you. I insisted, but a deafening crash echoed through the hall, making me jump. An unmistakable voice rang out, a voice that could shake the foundations of our company. Jessica. Get away from him. The icy stare of the sharp-featured woman reappeared, her authority drenching the air like a thick fog. She advanced toward us with purpose, her silhouette a ghastly shadow against the bright lights of the hallway. The weight of it all crashed down on me. I felt the urgency of that moment, decisions hanging in the balance, lives poised on a precipice, and everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. Run. Henry urged, grabbing my arm just as the board members burst through the door, closing in on us like wolves encircled around their prey. And as I glimpsed the fear in his eyes, I couldn't help but wonder, how far would we have to go to reclaim our power now? Would this be the moment where choices would tear us apart, or could we become the very force capable of carving our path? There was no going back, no remaining in the shadows, and with that realization came an unsettling clarity. This fight was just beginning. As I stood there, adrenaline pulsing through my veins, I felt the weight of the moment settle heavily upon my shoulders. The board members were approaching with their eyes alight with the fury of wounded pride, and I could feel the breath of fear grazing my spine. Henry grasped my wrist, his expression torn between concern and an instinctive urge to flee. But I couldn't run, I wouldn't. Jessica, he murmured, urgency seeping from each syllable, please, this isn't safe. And yet, in his terrified gaze, I saw a glimmer of desperation that mirrored my own. We were caught in a hurricane of power plays, of facades wearing thin. I thought of the lives that depended on our courage, the people standing behind me who had gathered the strength to speak their truths. We were no longer just individuals, we were a movement, a constellation of voices that could not be silenced by fear alone. Henry, we can't walk away. Not now. I pulled my arm free from his grasp, stepping forward defiantly, feeling the surge of collective strength swelling among my friends and allies. They've taken enough from us, and it's time to bring the truth to light. The sharp-featured woman narrowed her eyes, stopping a few paces away, her presence radiating authority infused with the sharp edges of disdain. You're making a grave mistake, young lady, she warned, voice smooth as ice but crackling like the air before a storm. That is it a mistake to seek the truth? I replied, my voice resolute, fueled by the knowledge of the lives entwined with mine in this battle. Someone from the crowd gasped, and I turned to see Emma standing across the threshold, her expression a mix of anticipation and fear, her own courage a beacon shining amidst the encroaching shadows. The other team members shifted nervously, exchanging looks imbued with uncertainty. If I faltered now, our movement, our blossoming sense of community might wither beneath the oppressive might of those in power. It's time, I declared, raising my chin defiantly, locking my gaze onto the corporate titan wearing an all too familiar smirk, confident in his dominion. Time for change. Time for accountability. We deserve more than this. We deserve a voice. But then the world shifted beneath me, a shattering that reverberated through my core when a voice I hadn't quite anticipated echoed through the atmosphere. If you think running this company is as simple as following the ebb and flow of your little protests, you're mistaken. Turning, I saw Anthony striding, fractured confidence giving way to something much darker than ridicule. His stance proclaimed undeniable authority, one forged elsewhere. But you know what? He continued, cool and calculated. I admire your audacity. Boldness without wisdom often leads to chaos. Chaos I thrive upon. That I held my breath, dread clenching my stomach. It felt like fresh air mixed with terror as he surveyed the scene like a hawk eyeing its prey, and I realized I was standing, vulnerable in that moment, its trajectory abounding not just with consequence, but a battlefield already laid with stakes too high. After all, he quipped, you've opened Pandora's box, dear Jessica. The room tensed, electrified with anticipation of his next words, just before a fleeting flicker of something behind his gaze hinted at a pain buried under layers of practiced malice. What happens when you realize the shadows you sought to expose are already waiting behind you? The fear coursing through me suddenly transformed into boiling anger. Enough with the veiled threats, Anthony. You can't intimidate someone who's already lost everything and found their voice. The board members shifted, concern twisting their expressions, yet they remained anchored to their power. Anthony's eyes glinted, a twisted smile forming on his lips. Let the games begin, then. My heart thundered as the tension in the air spiraled. There was an unyielding truth permeating through this chaotic mess. Fear flourished through silence, but unity shone brighter than any intimidation they could muster. The illusion crumbled, revealing the raw, fragile threads binding us all together. Each of us, Emma, Henry, the other employees, now stood on the precipice of transformation, from being mere players in someone else's game to fostering our own magnificent revolution. The truth can't be suppressed forever, I declared, my voice bursting forth like lightning. We are ready to take ownership of our narrative. And if you want to confront us, then do it. The board members recoiled, but the icy stare from the sharp-featured woman began to thaw, towards something resembling recognition. With bravery ignited within me, I knew the world wasn't merely black or white, it was layered in shades filled with intricate stories of struggle. I turned to the crowd, feeling the warmth of solidarity unfurling between us. Your simple presence became a reassurance amidst uncertainty, a reminder that we shared a bond that could weather any storm. But before words could escape my lips, the door swung wide, revealing the figure draped in shadows again, now illuminated in the brilliant light of the room, the unmistakable silhouette of the woman who had engaged me before. She had heard every word, every tremor of our candor, and from the determined look on her face, it was clear she carried the weight of purpose. No more silence. She declared, her voice cascading through the tension, intertwining with courage. You've shown the first flickers of what is possible. Stand firm in the face of intimidation, and together we will carve out a path for others to follow. A crest of exhilarated applause erupted, filling the space and pulsating with hope. If that applause restrained itself, the stronghold of power encircling us began to lose its grip, as if the very fabric of their domination started to fray. Together, we were no longer alone, rather, we were a tapestry woven with threads of mutual resilience. The board members faltered, and as they whispered amongst themselves, searching for clarity in the fracturing facade, a surge of conviction washed over me. I took a step forward, my voice imbued with determination. If there's corruption, we will expose it. If there are abuses of power, we will hold you accountable. Together, we stand tall, and we will not back down. In that moment, I recognized something deep within me, a truth that arose from the ashes of fear. Our collective voices, our shared stories, and our unyielding solidarity held more power than any elite could suppress. The tension between our two worlds, the light and the dark, tipped, a visceral force sparking a profound awakening. And so, it was there, amidst the rising chorus of applause, that I understood the journey wasn't simply about seeking vindication. It was about awakening something far more significant within ourselves, a powerful reminder that our stories mattered. This is only the beginning, I whispered softly, nearly drowning in the waves of unity swelling around me. With each heartbeat, each breath, I knew we would rise together, our collective resolve changing the course of the tides, shaping our futures. In the midst of the chaos, a final line resounded across the room, an echo punctuated by fervent resolve: we will forge a world where every voice counts. And with that rallying declaration, I felt an unabridged sense of belonging take root, blossoming toward a horizon ignited by hope.